right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to LAFB Live. I am your co-host, Ryan Dyer, joined as always by the great bearded Zeus, Stephen Haglin. What's up, brother? How you doing?
I appreciate that, man. I always love when people compliment my beard. It's my favorite compliment that you could possibly give me. But I'm doing great, man. Just hanging out. Summer is officially here in Fresno. It's going to be a 98 degrees today. And then we're hitting triple digits by Wednesday for the rest of the summer out. So summer is here. Now we just need school to be over with, and then we'll get it started.
So I've been to Fresno a few times, but the one time I was there, one of my buddies in college when I went to Long Beach State, after his sophomore year, decided he was going to go to chiropractor school over in Georgia, and he's from the Fresno Clovis area. So his parents were going to do a going away party for him. So they invited all us up there just for the weekend, just to hang out before he moved out east. And that week, I always pictured Fresno Clovis just being, like a dry heat, like a Palm Springs. I don't know if this was a random weekend, but it was the most humid weather it was more humid than when I've been to Florida.
Oh, wow.
This was a weird weekend, but it was crazy humid.
Yeah, because we don't get a lot of humidity here. So that must have been a weird, maybe it had rain the day before or something like that.
It must have been, because that's all I remember specifically about that weekend, just how hot and humid it was.
Yeah.
Maybe we were all complaining. I don't know.
It's been nice, like weather-wise, because the overall climate is very similar to Salt Lake City, where I grew up. It just doesn't snow in the winters, because in the summers in Utah it gets up to 90, so it gets hotter here, but it doesn't snow in the winter. So I'll take that trade-off all day, every day.
Oh, absolutely. So, well, good. Well, hey, at least summer means no school and a little break for you and the wife.
Yeah.
I am in a different location today, in a hotel in Denver, so kind of a different backdrop for everyone. But it's sunny right now. It's supposed to rain all weekend that I'm here, so we'll see. We'll see what transpires with that. But different plot. I had to bring the show on the road.
Yeah, it's always good to go on different places. You grew up in Denver, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, grew up here. Been in LA though for almost 12 years, but my folks are out here, and so for anyone that's been following me, my dad's been in the hospital, so I came out to give him a visit and see how he's doing. So he is, just a brief update, he is progressing, still a long way to go, but I've been the only one being able to visit him, so that's been nice. I saw him yesterday, and then I'll see him again today after we jump off this. So that'll be nice.
Well, that's great, good, man. Hopefully he gets on the mend pretty soon.
Yeah, we hope so. So what was crazy is yesterday I'm seeing him, and then you can only see him for an hour, since they're like considered COVID patients, even though he's on day 20, so he's not spreadable. Yeah. But so I'm leaving. As I'm walking out, my brother calls me. He's like, "Hey, just heads up, I'm at the same hospital. I just dropped mom off at the ER. She thinks she has a clot in her lung now." So I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" Like, now, so luckily she was there for 8 hours or so.
Jeez.
Found out it was just like a really bad swelling, but it wasn't a clot. So she was able to get sent home. But I was like, dude, what a craziness.
It is crazy. My uncle had COVID last summer, and he had like some big complications with it. And they ended up thinking that he had blood clots in his leg, but they were unrelated to COVID. But because he had COVID, they got like much worse. And so the doctor initially thought that they were going to have to amputate his leg.
Oh, man.
And it was just a whole mess. Thankfully, everything worked out fine. He still has both of his legs. And, I think people really underestimate how tough COVID can be once you are a little bit older, and how hard it can be to overcome.
Yeah. Well, and the last thing I'll say, I think too, what I've noticed, again, I'm not saying this through science or being a doctor, but just from people that have had it, the COVID itself is bad, but what it seems to do is it weakens things, and then other things end up happening. So like, my dad's not in the hospital necessarily because of COVID, but it caused all these other complications and infections in his blood that he got after having it, because he was so weak. And for the perfect storm, my dad had strep throat like a week before he got COVID. So he was already like no immune system then. My dad's only like 54. Like, he's a young, healthy guy. So it wasn't like they were an at-risk people. It just was the perfect storm that all happened at once. But anyway, from 3 days ago, he's doing much better. So I'm very happy that I was able to come out.
That's great.
Yeah. So we'll go see.
That's great.
But anyway, we got a great show today. We're talking, Stephen wrote a great article. You can find it on the LA Football Network, talking about the infamous sophomore slump. So we'll talk about Justin Herbert and if that's a possibility For Rams talk, we'll do a little Matthew Stafford, some expectations of this upcoming season and what's we can expect from him. And then lastly, we're going to talk about some guys that can have breakout years for both these teams. Doesn't have to necessarily be a second-year guy, but probably that'll be the mainstay. But, there could be some later older guys that can finally break out. We didn't really get hanging out or talking much until he was already off the team, but every year I was like, Gerald Everett, this is the year he's breaking out. Every year. He never freaking did. And the guy just let me down. Now he plays for the rival. So that'll be the show. But let's get in. I'll let you kick it off. Let's talk a little bit. Justin Herbert, man, the unicorn, brisket, whatever, all the herb, whatever, all the stuff. But sophomore slump. Is there a real shot of this, or you think he breaks the mold? Or is there even a true sophomore slump? Or is that just a narrative that gets pushed falsely?
I think there are cases of a legitimate sophomore slump from what I was looking at. I think the two biggest ones that people will remember are Baker Mayfield and Dak Prescott. And so I think there is some legitimacy to the narrative, but I think it also gets pumped up by people like Dwayne Haskins and Johnny Manziel and people who will start a few games as rookies and then, 6 or 7 games during their second year and are just not good football players, right? So I think, I wrote in my article, like there are some qualifiers here, that we have to get around, somebody like Nick Foles or Colin Kaepernick or obviously Patrick Mahomes who don't play a lot as rookies. They obviously don't qualify. And so there are legitimate people who actually slump like Baker Mayfield and Dak, like I said. But from what I was able to find, the majority of these players who start, at least 10 games as rookies, head into their second year, and they make some kind of improvement. Matt Ryan, he wasn't as efficient as a passer in his second year, but he threw more touchdowns. His touchdown percentage went higher. His yards per attempt increased, but he threw more interceptions and, his passer rating decreased. So it kind of depends on what you classify as a slump. But in terms of like Dak specifically and Baker specifically, I think everybody remember that Baker was receiving, arguably the worst coaching in the league at the time. Freddie Kitchens. And I know they had Odell and it was so bad. Like, I did, first year coaches expectation too. And like, it was amazing how often the Browns were on that list of hiring first time coaches and no one was worse than Freddie Kitchens. But, I think, in terms of a sophomore slump, from what I found, they happened because of two reasons. A, poor coaching, which, no one really knows what that's going to be like for the Chargers, but I think most of us agree that it will be, not bad. And then the second reason is that they are either struggling with injuries themselves or the supporting cast around him gets injured. And so some people remember Dak's sophomore season. Well, his rookie season will go back, right? They won 13 games. They made it to the divisional round, and then that was the Dez catch-it game against the Packers. So they were Super Bowl contenders right away. Of course, he took over for Tony Romo, wasn't expected to play a lot. But then in his second year, Ezekiel Elliott only played 8 games, and Tyron Smith only played 9. And so there was this kind of erosion or deterioration of the supporting cast around him. And so I think we saw Justin Herbert go through that kind of erosion last year, right? Brian Blaga misses games. Trey Turner misses games. Keenan Allen misses games. Hunter Henry misses games. Everybody around him, essentially, Austin Eckler played half the season. So we've already seen Justin Herbert play through adversity, play through poor coaching, and an erosion of his supporting cast, and he still had a historic season. So I personally don't think that the slump is a legitimate possibility because we've seen him thrive despite the circumstances around him. But I will say that I do think that certain aspects of his statistics will probably come down because, as you know, covering the Rams the last few years, they'd prefer not to throw the football 50 times a game, which was the case for Herbert. He had 4 or 5 games where he had 51, 52 attempts. And so I think some of his statistics will come down, at least in terms of game averages. But I think the overall emphasis for him from the coaching staff is going to be efficiency, right? Like you saw the offensive line, you get him more weapons, specifically in the red zone, and his efficiency, because of everything that they've done on paper, should theoretically increase, which in my opinion is the goal. And if that happens, that's a fantastic outcome for him.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you hit it too. It's depends how you define slump. Like if takes a statistic step back, but the team wins 10 or 11 games and he's more efficient, then absolutely that's not a sophomore slump just because he throws less touchdowns or maybe 200 less yards or whatnot. I just think from what we've seen, let me ask you this, because I think me and you are absolutely on the same page, and I 100% think this coaching staff is going to be fantastic. But someone actually rose that question on, I think, on one of our YouTube videos about that. A lot of us, specifically, I know my show, your show, my buddies at Chargers Unleashed, but most of the Charger shows all think that this is a huge upgrade at coaching staff. But at the same time, first-year head coach, first-year defensive coordinator, a failed offensive coordinator. Now, we think this is great, but let me just ask you for the sake of asking, like, what is it that we think this coaching staff is going to be better than what was here before? Is it just that it can't get worse?
Well, I think the one thing I feel confident in saying that it did improve is the late game management, right? That was the biggest issue with Anthony Lynn, even going back to when they won 12 games in 2018. And, at least right now, Brandon Staley is saying all the right things in terms of analytics and being a data-driven team, which I think will help their late game management situations. And so we truly never know what a first-year head coach is going to be like. But to me, I'm more confident in the Chargers offense figuring things out relatively quickly than I am the defense, because the defense is going through a complete scheme overhaul, right? They're changing base defensive fronts. They're changing coverage tendencies from strictly being, cover 3, occasionally man, to now they're going to play quarters. Now they're going to play cover 6. Now they're going to play man. Now they're going to do cover 3. They're going to do everything is getting overhauled. Whereas several of the coaches and the players have said that they're going to build off of at least some things that Justin Herbert did as a rookie and what he was comfortable with. So it's going to be rooted partially in the Shanahan system and partially in the Sean Payton system. So in terms of Justin Herbert, I think it's going to be an upgrade. I think, that side of the ball I do feel confident in. It's just overall for the team, I don't know if the coaching staff they might win. They might go 6-11. They might struggle on defense. But I think offensively, I feel pretty safe that it's an upgrade.
Yeah. Nice job. I was impressed you got the math there right. 6-11. They didn't have to.
It's taken me a long time, and I still hate it. And those who know, I'm not crazy OCD, but I like things to line up. I like straight lines. I like even numbers. So just the fact that we don't have a legitimate 500 anymore, there's no 8-8 season, and I have to predict these games to end in odd numbers. I'm just no, it's driving me nuts.
Yeah, no, I agree. So, I think Todd Smith here brings up a good point. Lombardi's offense hopefully designed to improve efficiency and just, more plays that with better success rates. Because there was a lot of plays last year that I was less critical on Shane Steichen, but there were plays that Herbert just made magic. They had such a low efficiency for success, and he somehow made him successful. And that necessarily wasn't the actual play, just how it broke down in front of him and whatnot, and him just making magic. But this offense should be much more, quick, decisive, make things happen. I mean, if you watch, like you said, Shanahan's offense, if you watch McVay's offense, if you watch the Saints and Sean Payton's offense, it's a well-oiled machine of just, rapid, quick, not just go off script all the time. And hopefully they'll still allow him to do that a little bit. I think that will help.
Not to beat a dead horse, and I'm they're not on the team anymore, but I think the biggest frustration, at least for me, from Shane Steichen and Anthony Lynn is that you watch the Jets game, and it's a really good game plan. You got a good mix of quick game and bootlegs, and Herbert's not really under pressure all that much, and then you watch them play against the Patriots and the Dolphins and the Bills, and it's just all of the creative plays are out the window. It's all, conservative, run up the middle, 7-step drop for Justin Herbert. And it's you're not consistently helping him succeed. And so that's the thing that I'm most excited to watch is, just this melding of minds that Brandon Staley has collected. And like you just said, the Lombardi system is it's a lot of quick game, and it's a lot of, getting the ball out fast and into the getting the ball into the hands of the playmakers. And then the Shanahan system it's a lot of, bootleg action and easy throws. And so I think Justin Herbert's, his quality of life is going to improve. Like, he's not going to be under pressure as much. He's going to have easier throws, hopefully. And if this offense stays relatively healthy, then I don't see a reason why Justin Herbert can't throw for, 4,700 yards, 40 touchdowns, and have a big season.
Yeah, love that. This question from LA Rams FC, I'll get your take and I'll say it, but I think this is like the cliche, and I'm not saying this because he asked it or trying to call him out or anything, he or she. But it's a standard question is, defenses are going to figure them out, which, is true a little bit, but I just think there's certain quarterbacks you can watch and you're like, okay, yeah, they're going to obviously figure out a little bit to slow down, but some quarterbacks they're just good, technically sound quarterbacks. It's not like a flash in the pan. Like, there's some quarterbacks you watch and you're like, wow, electrifying, that's fun, but it's like, is that sustainable? Like,
right.
Herbert is just good quarterback play. 4-year starter at Oregon. He's not some guy that came out of nowhere and just like took the league by storm. Yeah, he took the league by storm, but he was a 6th overall pick and a 4-year starter before that. So, I mean, a Rose Bowl winner. Do you think that's an issue at all, or you're not concerned about the defense figuring him out?
I think when you're talking about defenses figuring players out, it's because they are partially gimmick players. And you look at Lamar Jackson is a fantastic player, and I think the hate that he gets is really overstated. But his best attribute is his legs and what he does as a runner. And so we saw this past season, teams were able to at least somewhat figure him out as a runner. We saw Kyler Murray kind of struggle down the stretch last season because teams were daring him to beat them with his arm and instead of his legs. And so Justin Herbert is a good athlete and he uses his legs, but he's not strictly a running quarterback. And so I think when defenses figure out, opposing quarterbacks, it's more so that they have some element of a gimmick style to their game. And there's no answer to the perfectly placed ball. That's always the case. And that was kind of an issue that I had with Justin Herbert coming out. But last season, I thought his ball placement was consistently outstanding. And he's arguably got the strongest, biggest arm in the league. And, we've seen that, you have no answer for that. And so I'm not super worried about that, especially with a scheme change incoming. But I think that is more of a possibility than a slump. I think, could other defenses figure out ways to keep him from hitting the deep ball so effectively? Sure. But like he said, that's not really, I don't think that classifies as a slump as much as he's going to have to adjust and have to figure out how to take what the defense gives him, which I think he is absolutely capable of doing.
Yeah, exactly. And that'll be the interesting thing to watch of how that progresses. Last thing I'll say about the coaching staff, before we move on then to talk about Matthew Stafford, is I think a reason why me just personally am so confident in this staff is when you look at new coaching hires, you look at, what these coaches do with scheme, how they've developed players at their, role positions or coordinator positions. But then you also, and this can sometimes be overstated, obviously, but you also, I think it's important to somewhat look at, where they came from, right? The tree they come from, or at least who they tutored under. And that's nothing against Anthony Lynn, but, here's a guy who was a running back coach forever, was in the league forever, had, different stints everywhere, but never really got that opportunity. Whereas a guy like Brandon Staley, being under Vic Fangio and then being under Sean McVay in 3 short years, 2 of the league's greatest football minds. Say what you want about Vic Fangio as a head coach so far, but no one argues that he's one of the best defensive minds in the game. No one would argue that Sean McVay is not one of the best offensive minds in the game. And so just being under that for 2 years, Ronaldo Hill also being under Vic Fangio for many times as their DB coach. And then Joe Lombardi, had a failed stint with, Jim Caldwell in Detroit, but then being with Sean Payton, who I know a lot of people, especially in LA, hate Sean Payton, but you can't argue that he's a bad coach. Like, the guy knows what he's doing and is a great mind. And, really recalibrating his career there back in New Orleans with also Drew Brees. So you look at all those factors together, and then you bring these guys into one room And that's, I think, where our confidence comes from, is that, yes, this is going to be a better unit than what was here previously when Anthony Lynn comes from Buffalo, who, is under Rex Ryan. And, then he keeps Shane Steichen, who was on the previous staff, ends up, and I actually like Shane Steichen, but, he comes from the previous, McCoy, there we go, McCoy staff. And so I think when you look at that, that's why there's so much confidence in this current staff, and why I think even if the wins don't come right away, the rate of play and change of coaching style is going to be that much better.
Absolutely. I think even if they struggle in year one, I think 2022 is going to be that go for it season. But I've still seen some people be like, oh, well, Joe Lombardi was terrible in Detroit. And like, listen, everything is terrible in Detroit. Like it's been a rough couple decades for the Lions franchise. And I think, look, when I saw that was the hire, I kind of, went back and looked at some articles of like what was said when they hired Lombardi. And it was just kind of viewed as an awkward fit. Like Lombardi wasn't really connected to Caldwell. It was just kind of like they thought that Lombardi was like this next up and coming coach. And at the time it looked like he was. And so much we've seen in the past, so much of coaching is based, like it's successful because of relationships and communication. Yeah. And we know that Brandon Staley, like he said that he grew up in a Lombardi led offense. Like they're very close and they are both very effective communicators. And so, I think, could they maybe kind of struggle to really hash things out in the first year? Sure, that's always possible. But I think because of their relationship and because of their ability as communicators, you could add in Frank Smith as well. Frank Smith was in New Orleans with Lombardi. So the entire coaching staff is tied in at some point, whether it's to Brandon Staley or to another coach on the staff. And I just think, we all kind of made the joke like, oh, Brandon Staley's just kind of hiring his friends. It's like, well, that's kind of a good thing, right? Because they know what each other's tendencies are. They know what they are like as people. They know what they are like as employees. So I like I said, I'm very confident in this offense figuring things out and allowing Justin Herbert specifically to avoid a sophomore slump.
Yeah, I agree. So I don't really see a world where he statistics, but that's if the team's winning, you'll take that all day. And you got to love what they've done in the offseason so far. So, all right, let's move on to Matthew Stafford. Oh, go ahead.
I wasn't saying anything.
Did I lose you a little bit? You frozen over there?
Yeah, you're frozen to me for a second, but I think we're good now.
Okay. All right. We're back. Hotel Wi-Fi, probably not the best. Thumbs up. I think we're a little off. Hey, we'll get it. Okay. So let's talk a little Matthew Stafford now. We've talked about it a lot. I've talked about it, or you probably haven't on your show, Charters Only, but I've talked about it a ton on my show, just what this trade means for the Rams. But from you being more afar, not necessarily covering the Rams, but, you're with the LA Football Network. So we talk a lot, in the group Slack and all that. What are just as like an opposing fan, I guess, or someone covering a different team, what would your expectations be? Because obviously us that cover the Rams or fans of the Rams, the expectations are like through the roof for this guy this season. But for you, that probably has a more tempered expectations. What are you kind of looking for in a Stafford-led Rams team?
Well, as a casual fan, I'm just very curious to see how this pans out, because I think, I've always had an affinity for Matthew Stafford and his ability as a pure quarterback, as a pure talent. I think he's been one of the more underappreciated talents in the league. Obviously struggled with some injuries the past couple seasons. I think this past season he only played, or was in 2018 or 19. I can't remember. One of the seasons he only played like 8 games. So he has struggled with some injuries and shown that he's aged a little bit. I mean, again, playing in Detroit will do that to someone. But stylistically, he's very different than Jared Goff. I think Jared Goff, he was a player that I looked at researching this article because he was so bad as a rookie. But Jared Goff was a very successful quarterback for the previous 3 years before last season under Sean McVay, and I don't think it's unfair to say that Matthew Stafford is a more talented thrower of the football than Jared Goff is. And it's just that Matthew Stafford, maybe he has some bad habits from playing in Detroit. Maybe he's a little banged up. And so I think last time I checked, he was 8th in MVP odds and Justin Herbert was 9th, which feels about right to me. But if I had to choose one of the two LA quarterbacks to place a bet on for MVP, I would probably pick Stafford. I'm not like sky high expectations for Matthew Stafford, but I do think that he could absolutely have a special season. And, you want to talk about someone who has elevated the ceiling of his team more so than any other offseason acquisition. I don't know if I wouldn't say Stafford is first on that list.
I think he has to be. I mean, yeah, anytime you upgrade a position is great. Anytime you upgrade the quarterback position is huge, game changer. And they certainly did that. One interesting tidbit, and this will tie in with the Chargers too, or probably tie in more so. So Matthew Stafford's only Pro Bowl season was Joe Lombardi's first season as the OC, and his highest efficient season, so highest completion percentage, was his second season with Joe Lombardi. They only had 2 seasons together, but he actually performed pretty well with him. So I think that also bodes well for Justin Herbert. But anyway, I think talked about this on my last show about both these guys, Herbert having a new system come in and Stafford coming into an entire new situation, new system, new environment, new teammates, new living situation, new place where you wake up, new facility. Yeah. And the expectations are high, but does that pose a growing pains, if you will? He's a veteran, and I think what we kind of came to the conclusion is it's not anything new. It's just different. And it's not necessarily, whereas Herbert being a second year guy, you really want to get into your routine early on and often to really continue your growth. Stafford's been in the league so long that there's a lot of new things coming at him, but it's just different. It's not anything new that he can't adjust to quickly. He's had 4 different offensive coordinators, had multiple different head coaches. So he's had these changes a lot. So now he just goes to a better change, and it's just a different situation where, it's just, he'll be playing on the road for the first few weeks until he really gets comfortable. But I think expectations are through the roof. I mean, this is definitely a Super Bowl or bust team right now. I think, if they make it and lose the Super Bowl, I don't think it's obviously anytime you don't win, it's considered a lost season, but I think people would be at least accepting if they made it a Super Bowl loss, then just build upon that. But this is not a team that certainly can't miss the playoffs, but definitely I think a first round exit would be deemed as a very, very bad season. And I think Stafford, statistically, people expect him to finish in that top 5 to 7 range just because of the weapons he now has. Let me ask you this. Do you think this is the best skill position wise, or are these the best weapons Stafford overall? Obviously Calvin Johnson's probably the best he's ever had, but overall, is this the best weapon set, the best arsenal Stafford's had in his career, you think?
Even recently, I would still say no, because I'm a big fan of Kenny Golladay and Marvin Jones. I think he's one of the more underrated players in the league too. So in a vacuum, if I had to choose between Golladay and Marvin Jones over Woods and Cooper Kupp, I could see an argument for Golladay and Marvin Jones being the case there. But, outside of that, I'm a big fan of Cam Akers. As anybody who listened to our show last year knows, I thought that he was, the best running back in the class last year. And then you add in, not Gerald Everett. I almost said Gerald Everett. Tyler Higbee. Tyler Higbee, very solid tight end, not somebody that's going to be like a top 5 guy, but, could easily be in the top 10 kind of thing. And then you add in Deshaun Jackson, like Kevin just said, if Deshaun Jackson is healthy and Tutu Atwell is healthy, that's a really solid 4 receivers. And then obviously, you add in Van Jefferson as well. So I really like the supporting cast, but the biggest thing for Stafford this year, we've kind of seen the Shanahan system is kind of taken over the league. And it's such a quarterback friendly system. Yeah. And, we've seen that very same system, revive Ryan Tannehill's career, kind of revived Aaron Rodgers' career, helped him get to an MVP season last year. And, no shade to Jared Goff, but I think at Jared Goff's best, he's probably a top 12, maybe top 10 guy. And I think at Matthew Stafford's best, I think he could be a top 5 guy with Sean McVay making things so easier for him. And, I think one of the things, just kind of looking at it, his, at least in touchdown percentages, he was at 4.9 this past season. He was at 5.5 the season before that, 3.8 the season before that. So he was not getting a ton of easy, successful throws in Detroit. And that's going to be very different in Los Angeles with Sean McVay designing things with Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp and everybody. So rightfully so, I think expectations are very high for Matthew Stafford.
Yeah. So from just top heavy, yeah, I would agree. This probably isn't his best arsenal. Obviously, you look at Calvin Johnson. I think just mano Kenny Galladay, and we'll see how they do with their new respective teams. Maybe that was a lot of Matthew Stafford making them better.
Yeah, that's
you
true.
Can never be sure when guys leave and do things, but on the surface, Kenny Galladay and Marvin Jones certainly great. He had Golden Tate in there also for a number of years.
That's true. Yeah.
But I think from just top to bottom, this is his best. I think
1 through 5 for sure.
Yeah, when you look at the top 3 receivers, the tight end, and the running back, like he may finally have a running game, which is going to be huge for him. What's the statistic? Like he's had in the last decade or last like number of years, he had like 100-yard rusher or something, or like 2, and it was like Kerryon Johnson's rookie year or something.
Yeah, it's not been good.
Like
they went from
and their best running back last year was.
Sorry, looks like we got disconnected a bit, but go ahead.
Oh, you were on something. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, when he was a young quarterback, they had, like Reggie Bush and Javid Best, and like their running backs were just like not very good. And then their offensive scheme wasn't very good. And then their offensive line wasn't very good. And so I will say, like, the one thing that Stafford had recently in Detroit was a good offensive line.
Yeah.
I think the last few years they've really done a good job there. Obviously, new regime there now, but now you got in Penei Sewell. So that is the one thing that he always had in Detroit, was a good offensive line and a good, at least receiving cast, but never a good running game, which was always confusing.
Yeah, well, the way Detroit ran things, and obviously they've been known as a organization that has not been run well for quite some time, but it's like they would actually address one thing, but it's like they would address one area of need like per offseason. They wouldn't just tackle all their needs. So it's like, okay, we address the offensive line, but we've done nothing for the running game. We'll do that next year. Then they would do the receivers, and then nothing for the run. And it's like, okay, I don't know if it's just they can't get people to sign in Detroit. I mean, maybe that's part of it too. But even drafting. But yeah, anyway, I just think, this core is the best he's had. It's a core that knows this system. So he's obviously coming in to learn it, but Robert Woods is one of the best in the game, a cerebral player, extremely smart. So, he's going to, I don't have any question that Matthew Stafford's not going to know the playbook, but if there's any issues in the huddle, there's guys like Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp that know exactly where everyone needs to be. Andrew Whitworth, I mean, he's the guy that leads that offense. I mean, he knows where everyone needs to be. He could play on all 5 positions too on the offensive line. Maybe he could even line up in the slot. Who knows? The guy looks like he's in the best shape of his life right now. So
I need some Andrew Whitworth touchdowns this year.
Oh, we need that. I don't know how he has it. I mean, we get all these big guys that get touchdowns. How does Big Whit not have one yet?
I know. So the Rams obviously go 10-6 last year, win a playoff game. Their division is very, very difficult. I think it's the best division in the league. But the NFC is relatively wide open. I think obviously you have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but I mean, people don't remember, like, they weren't all that good during the regular season. So I wouldn't call them 100% the favorites. And obviously you have the Saints without Drew Brees. Maybe the Packers don't have Aaron Rodgers. So outside of Stafford, like, what's the ceiling for the Rams this year? And I don't know enough about their schedule to say, like, do they have a hard schedule or an easy schedule? But in terms of wins and losses, how do you think this stacks up for the Rams?
Yeah, they have a fairly tough schedule, obviously, being where they went into the playoffs and where they got knocked out. So they play a lot of division, top guys. But I agree. I've said a lot about Tampa Bay, and this is not trying to throw shade at all. This is just being real. Like last season, the regular season, they had one win over a team 500, over a 500 win team. One win. They were 1-5 against teams with winning records. In the playoffs, they got Washington in the first round, also a sub 500 team. And then they get a New Orleans team that Drew Brees threw 3 interceptions and just looks horrible. And then they get a Packers team that, yes, they played great against the Packers. And obviously they played great against Kansas City, but they're also got lucky, and Kansas City had 4 offensive linemen out and
Yep.
could not protect Mahomes or anything. And their coaching staff just decided not to run the football and do anything to help their quarterback that had no offensive line. So
Yeah.
I don't want to just say, luck is into it, because Tampa Bay deserved to win. They were a great team. But just looking at all that, I don't have them as the favorite. I really don't. I mean, they're a great roster. They're a playoff team. They're probably the favorite in their division, especially with, what the QB situation is in New Orleans. But I don't think they are the best team. I think the Rams are a better team. The Packers, if Aaron Rodgers plays, is a better team. There's a number of other teams. I think Minnesota is going to be a real sleeper team this year. Not saying they're going to be better than them, but they're a team that's going to sneak up on people just because they had a historically bad defense for Mike Zimmer last year, and they've done a lot to improve that. So their defense can't get worse. The defense is even a little better. They're going to be a much better, formidable team. And we don't know what's going to go on with Chicago, who still has a solid defense, but they did lose some people. But who's going to play quarterback? Is it Dalton or Fields? But anyway, the Rams, I think, this is a definite, let me do the math in my head, but yeah, this is a 13-14 win team, I think. The biggest problem for them, and why they could slip again to that 10-11 wins, which fans will probably get worried about, media will get worried about, but their division is just so good. I mean, when you play 6 games against 3 perennial playoff teams, again, Cardinals need to prove it on the field, but on paper, that's a playoff team.
Yeah.
Niners, if they stay healthy, that's a playoff team. And obviously Seattle's, as long as they have Russell Wilson, is probably a playoff team. So, I mean, they could split the division 3-3. There's your 3 losses. If you slip up at all 2, you're down to 5 losses. I mean, they're still a playoff team, but expectations, I think, need to be tempered just because the division is so good. Anyone in the division can beat anyone, even if you have a terrible team. I mean, the Rams for years were awful, and they beat Seattle every year when they were in their heyday. It's just a division game. So for me, the expectation, the hope is 13-14 wins, but I think reality is more 11 or 12. It's just a gauntlet. They have the last 4 games, I think. Their last 4 games, I don't have it in front of me, and don't have it memorized, but it is like a brutal end of their schedule where they could end up losing 4 straight and end the season on a very sour note, or they could win 4 straight and look like the best team in the NFC. So it's tough, but I still think that they're over 11 wins is definitely their over under, and I think they sit closer to that 12 range.
I do as well. I think they'll manage to sweep one team in the division, I think, whether that's Arizona or San Francisco. Maybe San Francisco starts Trey Lance from day one. That could obviously change things, but yeah, this division is brutal, man. Like, a lot of people, when the Chargers went 12-4 and the Chiefs went 12-4 in 2018, were like, well, the AFC West is the best in the division, but this NFC West is brutal, man. It's a gauntlet for sure.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious to see, because I kind of look at the Seahawks. I don't really know how much they improved. Obviously, it was, they got Gabe Jackson, who I think will help that interior offensive line. But if the Niners start Trey Lance, I don't know how much, that elevates their ceiling. I'm a big fan of Lance's long-term future. And then I think the Cardinals could surprise some people too. They went 8-8 last year, add in AJ Green, JJ Watt. So they're older players, but players that I think should impact their season for sure.
And they started like 6-2 and then just went on a big slump. Kyler Murray wasn't totally healthy, had kind of the bum, like hamstring or ankle.
Yeah.
And to me, this season for the Cardinals is Cliff Kingsbury the coach. Like, I think that's the biggest question mark for them is he the guy that gets them over the hump? Because they have the roster. I mean, they have so much firepower on offense. Obviously, Kyler Murray, they added so many weapons on defense. They still have, Isaiah Simmons was a big draft pick. They added on the back, and they got one of the best safeties in Budda Baker. So I just checked to confirm. So those last 5 games for the Rams. So let's say they go into it, with 1 loss or 2 losses going into this 5-week stretch. They go Cardinals, Seahawks, Vikings, Ravens, Niners. Like that is a gauntlet of an end of the season that is going to really test the mettle of this team and how luckily it's at the end of the season. So I think that Stafford will be fully acclimated. The offense should be humming, hopefully.
Yeah.
McVay has yet to lose to the Cardinals as a coach of the Rams. He's 8-0 against them, but also has struggled against the Niners. So he's going to be licking his chops to hopefully try to finally beat Kyle Shanahan. And in the Seahawks, they're pretty split. It seems like they split 1-1 almost every year since McVay's been there. So, 12 games. That's kind of where I'm putting it. 12-5. God,
well, the thing to say here too is that I think the NFC is absolutely wide open, right? Like we've been kind of saying, whereas the AFC, I think the AFC pecking order is pretty clear. Like, I think it's, Chiefs 1, Bills 2, and then after that it gets a little. Browns probably 3, just on paper at least.
Yeah.
And then we'll have to see what happens in Miami and New England and stuff like that. But everybody's kind of hopping on the Chargers bandwagon as like a dark horse Super Bowl team, and I'm like, okay, like, do they have the talent? They have the top tier talent for sure, but the AFC is so good.
Yeah.
And you can get down the list and get to like 10 teams and find a playoff team still. The AFC North is probably going to produce 3 playoff teams, or at least 2, depending on how Big Ben plays. But I'm fairly confident saying that Baltimore and Cleveland will make it.
Yeah.
Obviously Kansas City will make it. Buffalo will make it. Maybe Miami and New England also make it. So
Broncos have a good roster if they get decent quarterback play. Like
the
Raiders, you just don't know. I don't think so, but you never know with the Raiders.
Like, the only teams that I'm confident in saying that will not be in playoff contention are like the Raiders, the Jets, and I don't know, man. Like the Bengals, the Texans. Like, there's some really, really bad teams in the conference, but outside of that, like, maybe the Broncos, maybe Teddy Bridgewater is the starter. I don't know. You're a bigger fan of Drew Lock, but maybe Teddy strikes lightning in a bottle and that defense is amazing and they win, 11, 12 games. Like, you can make the case for legitimately like 10 teams that they're going to be a playoff team. Whereas the NFC, it's like, you can get to 5 or 6. And then, last year they had the Bears, who were, they almost fired their head coach and their GM, and they went 8-8 and made the playoffs. So,
and Washington was 7-9 and won the division. Yeah. Well, I think it's going to be a lot better this year. But...
Right. The NFC is way more wide open to me than the AFC is, so that obviously helps the Rams out.
Yeah, I love this. My buddy Coach. This is so true for the Chargers.
Oh man.
Let's get into some last thing though. How funny is it? Because you started that conversation. How weird is it? We are in the twilight zone when just saying, yeah, you can pretty much lock in the Bills at 2 and the Browns at 3.
So weird. So weird. 2 teams that are like historically, like, people talk about the Chargers blowing leads and like being a tough team to watch for. Like, I mean, I know the Bills went to 4 Super Bowls, but they lost all those Super Bowls, and like they were the original like create new ways to lose. And the Browns, like, I mean, they've had nearly 3 0-16 seasons in my lifetime. So
yeah,
it's just wild to me, like, looking at them as clearly the best teams. But they've, this is what happens when you get the right head coach, right quarterback, right GM, and you're able to kind of build this success from those 3 people. And hopefully the Chargers will get to that point going forward too.
That's how it all starts. Yeah, you got to have that 3-person linear equation almost. So, all right. Last topic for LAFB Live. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Again, I'm Ryan Dowd, joined as always by the great Stephen Haglund. So, Rams and Chargers players most likely to break out. This could be second-year guys, could be third. Like I said, every year I was like, it's Gerald Everett. It's his year to break out. Heading into year 4, I'm like, it's his year to break out. I remember still his rookie year being at training camp down in Irvine and just watching him catch routes over the middle. Again, it was like 7-on-7, but like just seeing how freakishly athletic he was. Like, this guy's gonna be a problem. And it just never came to fruition in the games. But who's a guy, I'll just start with you, or a couple guys on the Chargers or Rams, if you know some Rams guys, that you see as potential breakout guys?
Well, the Rams is obviously Terrell Burgess. That's the obvious pick for me.
Yeah.
Coming into the John Johnson role, being able to be a starter, I think he's going to have a huge season for them, and I think he's going to become a fan favorite there. In terms of Chargers players, people are generally salty about him still, but I think it's Jerry Tillery. I really do. And I think, I think this is his first real off season. He had the shoulder surgery as a rookie, so he wasn't able to practice until training camp. And really just, didn't look like a very explosive player. And I think he absolutely needs to improve in the run game. I think he needs to get stronger at the point of attack. But as a pass rusher, he took a big step last year. The hand placement was better. He looked more explosive. And, people they remember, the play against Derek Carr where he beat Trent Brown, forced a fumble. That kind of play wasn't really happening when he was a rookie. And so I think, Brandon Staley is going to be able to use him in a variety of roles, someone that can rush from the inside, rush from the outside. So I think we could be looking at, like an 8 or 9 sack kind of season for Jerry Tillery. And I think that's going to be, somebody that Chargers fans are going to turn around on quickly, similar to like Michael Davis, because people were very, not looking forward to Michael Davis being the unquestioned starter last year. He turned out to be like one of their best defensive players from a week to week basis. So I think that's going to be Jerry Tillery this year.
I love that Brandon Staley calls Michael Davis Vato. I love that.
It's so funny. I love it.
It's so great. Yeah. Quickly before I comment on that, just this comment, Taylor Rapp won't be that John Ronson role. I'll let you counter too, but I just think Taylor Rapp's more of a, in the box safety. I don't think he truly fits that, over the top guy that John Johnson was more at. I think he's in the box. I think, honestly, I truly think the 2 starters are going to be Fuller and Terrell Burgess, and then Rapp will be that rotational third safety that comes in, plays close to the line of scrimmage. He's your thumper. So I just think he's a different role than what John Johnson does and Terrell Burgess, excuse me. Too many T's on that back end. But Terrell Burgess is more similar to what John Johnson did.
I kind of talked about him last week, but Terrell can play anywhere in the secondary except for outside corner. So he can play in the slot, play deep, play strong, play in the box. So I think, I don't know really what I forget his name right now, the new defensive coordinator. I'm totally blanking on
for the
Rams. Yeah.
Raheem Morris. Yeah.
Raheem Morris. Thank you. I don't know how much he's going to carry over from the Staley system and bring over, the cover 3 system, what that kind of mold is going to be like. But, Terrell Burgess is such a versatile safety, and I think he's going to be a great fit there. And it looked like he was having a really good rookie season before he broke his leg. It's just kind of unfortunate timing. So I think he's going to have a big season for them.
Yep. And last time I talked to him, he's like feeling 100%. So can't wait to see him in camp and what he's able to do and pair with Jordan Fuller, his draft mate. So quickly, I'll talk on Jerry Tillery, and then I'll give another Rams example. But no, I agree. Or I'll give a Chargers, and then I'll give a Rams. So
there you go.
Get a little of both. But I think Jerry Tillery, and everyone, this is what's so frustrating about him, is he shows flashes. Like there's times, I think in that, if I'm not mistaken, that week 1 game against the Bengals, he was like the best defensive player.
He was so good.
Game, I think it was against the Bengals. Yeah, he was like, we're like, all right, here he is, Jerry Tillery. This is the guy we drafted 28th overall.
Well, remember the Chargers in Denver? There was like that 3-play stretch where Tillery like forced a 3 and out by himself. He got a run stop, got a sack, got a pressure, forced a 3 and out. And it was like, this guy, you see the stretches of dominance, and against the Raiders, like I mentioned earlier as well. So, people like are very salty about him. And I get that he was inconsistent last year, but when you're looking at like a potential breakout player, you're looking at somebody that showed flashes that just needs to become more consistent. And so I think that's Jerry Tillery this year, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I think too, with Tillery and Gus Bradley's system, he was kind of a tweener. Like I feel like they didn't truly know where to have him. Like they have him in the inside, and then when the injuries last year, they put him to the outside, then they made him like a true like edge like rusher. So I think he'll fit way better in this 3-4 base, which I know they run way out of base very often, but he'll just fit better in what Staley wants to do, and he'll truly find a role that fits for his skill set and body size. And so, I think he's a kind of slam dunk breakout guy that, he kind of has to be. He needs to show out, or he might not be a Charger after this year. If I'm sticking with the Chargers for another breakout role or breakout player, there's a few guys at linebacker I look at. You could talk about Uchenna Nwosu a little bit. I think he's been good. It's just a matter of him just staying healthy and getting the reps. Right. I don't think it's necessarily like he's been like struggling and we're waiting for him to show out. Like when he's been on the field and healthy, he's been a productive player and had some good games, 2-sack game in the playoffs against Lamar Jackson and Baltimore. So I don't know if that qualifies as necessarily a breakout. Here's an interesting one. And it's hard to call it a breakout guy when he's going into his 11th season, but I really think Chris Harris Jr. is going to have a dominant season this year. I think when he was signed last offseason, there was, excitement, optimism, getting a guy from 100%. A division rival, 8-time Pro Bowler, and then really didn't play bad, didn't play great, but then also, missed 6 games with like a broken foot. And I think this year he's going to come out and show who he is. And I know he's, hopefully will play truly in the slot. He's familiar with Ronaldo Hill and Brandon Staley, so they know exactly how to utilize him where he got his best years. So breakout, maybe not right, considering he's an 8-time Pro Bowler and been in the league for 11 years.
Yeah.
But breakout for the Chargers, I think is fair because of what we saw last year. So I like Chris Harris Jr. this year.
I think that's a really good call. I do. I think that Harris
exactly.
is going to have. Yeah, I'm good. Are you good?
Okay, cool. Go ahead. Yeah, we're good.
I was just say I think Harris is going to have a huge season as well, as long as he's able to stay healthy. And we kind of talked about this last week, right? Like Brandon Staley last year used Troy Hill and Darius Williams as kind of these interchangeable pieces on the inside and outside, and he's able to do that this year with Harris and Asante Samuel Jr. So it's going to be a lot of fun to see how Staley seeks out these mismatches and how he, puts these players to best take advantage of them. And back to Nwosu, I think you're right. Like, it's never been a matter of production for me. It's just been a matter of Gus Bradley and his defensive staff kind of favoring other players over him. Mm-hmm. And if you're looking at just PFF pass rush win rate, Nwosu was in the top 10. He's a very efficient pass rusher. It's just that the past coaching staff didn't think that he could be an every down player. So could that count as a breakout player? Sure, I guess it depends how you classify that. But to me, I think you look at Nwosu as somebody who's already been successful, somebody who's been a starter at some points. So you could pick him, and I don't hate that argument. But I look at a breakout player as somebody who is kind of a younger player, showed flashes, and ready to take a true leap. And you could go with Chris Harris too, like you did, and I think that's a totally thing. I just think the way that I look at a breakout player is somebody that is ready to take a big leap forward in development. Joshua Kelly might not be on the roster this year, so that's not going to be my pick.
Come on.
Love the player, love the person, but I just think this coaching staff is really, really high on Larry Roundtree, so I'm not going to be surprised if Joshua Kelly gets cut in training camp.
Yeah, whole new regime. So, okay, let's end it with the charge with it. Let's talk. We talked all defense. Let's do one offensive player each, or we can do the same guy, and then we'll end with the Rams and wrap up this edition of LAFB Live. But is there a receiver, or we can't say offensive line because it's a completely new unit, so we don't even need to name anyone there. Yeah. But or running back, is there a someone on offense you expect to break out?
Someone said, "Have you seen Roundtree's quads?" That is so funny. I'm a big fan of Tyron Johnson's skill set. And I think if he's given the opportunity to be that wide receiver 3, I think he could be the breakout player for the Chargers offense. But I like we were just saying, new regime. I don't know how this coaching staff feels about this wide receiver position. I think some people are kind of assuming that Joshua Palmer is going to be eased into the role, but maybe he's wide receiver 3 from the start. And so like, I guess this is just kind of my way of saying like, whoever is wide receiver 3 is going to be that breakout player. I think this Chargers offense is going to have a ton of opportunities to be a successful high octane offense. So whether it's Tyron Johnson, Jalen Guyton, or Josh Palmer, I think whoever is wide receiver 3 is going to have a really, really good season.
Yep. That's exactly how I would say. A guy that I'm going to watch a lot in training camp is Joe Reed. Didn't even play last year at all, but I love the draft pick when they took him. I thought he was going to be a dynamic, brings a different skill set to the offense than every other receiver they have. And then he didn't even suit up for half the game. So, but it's a crowded room now. So again, he's a guy, him, KJ Hill, they could be guys that are roster cuts, but he's a guy that I'm going to watch in camp. And I mean, if he has 10 catches, that's a breakout season compared to his rookie year. So,
I really liked the pick, and I was excited to see how they would use him. And then Anthony Lynn compared him to Percy Harvin, and I was like, oh shit, like this guy's going to be electric. And then he just didn't play. And I'm like, that to me was one of the most confusing things that Anthony Lynn ever did as the Chargers head coach. How do you compare a player to Percy Harvin and then he doesn't see the field?
Yeah, it was bizarre for sure. So he's a guy I'm going to be keying in on throughout training camp. So, all right, let's wrap up with the Rams quickly before I bring out my player. I did like this question here about if Raheem Morris will go to more Dan Quinn's cover 3 or stick with the 2 high Staley. I think he's going to essentially take over what Staley did. You know, he comes from Raheem Morris, comes from a Tampa 2 system originally. And then obviously being with the Falcons, they ran a more cover 3 with Dan Quinn, but I think he's going to stick with what Staley built, not, add some wrinkles and stuff, but it'll be a very similar defense to what we saw, because when you have the number 1 defense, I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So he's a smart guy. He's been in the league long enough. That's why McVay hired him. And I think McVay wanted to hire someone that wouldn't totally overhaul his defense, wanted to hire someone that was a great communicator, just fired up his players, and then also wouldn't completely change everything they built in a short time. And Raheem Morris checks all those boxes, having a history with, running this too high set, being guys talk about him in practice about just being that raw, amped up, great communicator. And so I think that we'll see that defense look very similar to what we saw last year with some new wrinkles, but do not expect this to be the Atlanta Falcons, Dan Quinn, terrible cover 3. And I think the cover 3 can be successful, but it just wasn't obviously in Atlanta. So breakout player. Okay. I guess we'll just do the same. I'll do, you don't have to, but I'll do one defense, one offense. On defense, Terrell Burgess obviously is a definite good one. You got some corners to look at, but I'm going to talk about Traven Howard, who's a linebacker that was slated to start last year, ended up getting injured in training camp, missing the entire year. But he's a different skill set than all the other linebackers they have on the roster. He's your Corey Littleton type, sideline to sideline, more athletic, can actually cover. They just drafted Ernest Jones, who I actually really like that pick more than most. I think he's a really good, hard-nosed, bring your lunch pail to work linebacker, but he's a liability in coverage. He's not a 3-down linebacker. He's going to clog holes and stop the run. Traven Howard's a guy that can be on the field all 3 downs. And he's a guy that I think were extremely excited about his progression, being a super late round pick, and then ended up being slated to start last year with Brandon Staley. So we'll see how he works, with Chris Shula, and how he works this offseason with Raheem Morris, his progression from that injury. But if he's healthy, I have him slated as the starter. I have him and Ernest Jones as my 2 starting linebackers in this Rams defense. And he's a guy that people have not seen just because he hasn't played. So again, easy to break out when you have no production beforehand, but I think he could be that guy that, if healthy, can be, that 90, 100 tackle linebacker that is the next quote unquote Corey Littleton that kind of comes out of nowhere and ends up being an offseason commodity come time when he's a free agent. So that would be my defensive guy. I don't know if you have anyone. I mean, you got Terrell Burgess, so you can just jump to offense if you want.
Yeah, I think it's going to be Terrell there on defense. But that linebacker call is a good one for sure. Offensively, it's a little tougher to peg like a true breakout because, in terms of the receiving room, I really like Van Jefferson.
Yeah, that's the obvious one.
I think that is the obvious one. But then you've got, like we were just saying earlier, this receiver room is crowded with Tutu Atwell, Deshaun Jackson. So really, how much is Van Jefferson going to be involved this season? Cam Akers already kind of broke out, so I don't know if he would qualify. But I'm curious to see how Stafford's arrival affects Tyler Higbee. I know I already mentioned him, but he had close to 500 yards, he had 5 touchdowns last year. And Stafford had a really good connection with TJ Hawkinson the past couple years. But traditionally the Shanahan McVay system doesn't really use tight ends a whole lot, but I could certainly see a world where Higbee kind of jumps up into that 650, 700 yard world, maybe 6 or 7 touchdowns. So I think Van Jefferson is the obvious one just because, they use 3 receiver sets so often, and that's probably his role. But I think Tyler Higbee has some sneaky potential here too. I lose you, Ryan. Okay.
Those with us still. Sorry, having a hotel Wi-Fi. Gotta love it. Gotta love it. You back?
Yeah, I'm back. So I was just saying that I think it's either going to be Van Jefferson, but I do think that Tyler Higbee has some sneaky potential there. Yeah.
So you cut out there for a second, but we got the gist of it. Tyler Higbee. And he had a stretch in 2019, like a 3 or 4 game stretch that was the best tight end in the league for that stretch. So we saw the potential if utilized correctly. And we'll see how they can use him, and Matthew Stafford can get him involved. And yeah, I agree. There's really no one on this offense that, to me, is Van Jefferson's just the obvious one, just because he was a guy that drafted last year. Everyone was so excited about, and flashed some goodness, but just wasn't really needed that much because of how much depth they had. And Josh Reynolds had a really good season for them in that wide receiver 3 role. So I think he'll be that true wide receiver 3 per se, but obviously with Tutu Atwell and Deshaun Jackson, they'll run a lot of different sets when they have them in. So it'll be kind of rotation, wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4, depending how many wide receivers they have out there at a time. But that's the obvious one. But yeah, Cam Akers, already kind of broke out. Darrell Henderson, we still don't totally know how productive he can be, but that he's just that change of pace back. I know, remember last year, everyone was talking, there's a lot of people talking about how he was going to take over the backfield and be the bell cow guy. And I always thought he was that change of pace, come in and kind of take over a game for instances or for situations. And I think that's still kind of his role. So yeah, Van Jefferson, Tyler Higbee, I like those both. I think those are the biggest ones. So still having some connection issues here, but we'll wrap up with that. I think both these teams have a lot of excitement, but Steven, if you can hear me, thanks a lot.
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
In Milwaukee. Okay.
Yeah,
good.
thanks everyone for tuning in.
Good.
Sorry about the connection issues today, but I think this was some good conversation about Herbert and Stafford and everybody. So if you haven't, make sure and go check that article out. You can find it on the LAFB website. I think it's a very interesting topic for the Chargers and obviously very relevant to how successful their season will be.
Yeah, absolutely. Great stuff. Steven always putting up the power content on the LA Football Network. So make sure to check that out. LAFBnetwork.com. Thank you all for tuning in. This is LAFB Live. Hit us up on Twitter at Stephen I. Haglin or at Ryan Dyrud, LAFB. We'd love to talk Rams and Chargers with you guys, talk football as we continue to grow this platform, and got a lot of big stuff. So appreciate you all. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll be back next week, Saturday at